LA Kings fans react to the season so far. That's next on this fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us some positive comments wherever you listen to the show. And if you are watching on YouTube, we would love for you to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So our LA Kings are through 5 games of this new NHL season, and they have given us quite a bit to talk about through those 5 games. So let's get right into our weekly fan feedback show. If you're new to the show, we do this every Friday and give you a chance to let us know what's on your mind as an LA Kings fan. I'm going to read the emails in the order in which they were received, and some of them have been edited for time purposes. Our first email comes from Matt, and he is in parts unknown. He says, new listener, first-time emailer, really dig the show. Thank you. Well, Matt, thank you. Hope you'll email again. And if you do, let us know where you're from. I really like that for some reason. So Matt says, my question is, does it sound like, or it does sound like, you feel comfortable with Darcy Kuemper with his early performances? Do you feel equally as uncomfortable with Brandt Clarke's play this early on? He's clearly not living up to his role. Again, that was from Matt in parts unknown. Matt, thank you for the email again. Hope you will email again. To answer your question, I'm okay with Brandt Clarke so far. Has he been overly impressive? No. Has he been bad? No. I think he looks like a young player that's trying to figure out the NHL, and I have no doubt that he will. Now, how long will that take? I'll just say I'm pretty confident by the end of the season that we're going to see a player who has figured things out and will look like a solid NHL player. Now, does that mean he's going to be a star player at the end of the season? Probably not. How long will it take for him to turn into a star type player? We'll see. I think he's going to eventually be that. But he's just started his journey, and yeah, he's got a long way to go. And I think we all assumed there would be some growing pains. But when you say he, quote, clearly is not living up to his role, end quote, I'm not sure what you mean. Now, expectations with everything go with this, and I can't tell you what your expectations were of him. But my expectations were that he would be a young player who would show flashes of specialness and show that he could also make mistakes and errors in judgment and not do what he's supposed to do. It's just kind of all part of the process. But I certainly think he's very talented. And I think, like I said, I think we will see the growth through the season, both good and bad. And by the end of it, he'll be better off for it and be kind of a step closer to what we all hope he will be at some point in the near future. Our next email comes from Carlos. He's in Mexico City. He says, I have watched all 5 games so far this season. Here's my quick 2 cents assessment on the East Coast trip. 5 games, 6 points. That's better than par for the course. Yes, we're a -1 on points scored, but it was on the road. Are we a playoff team? Yes, as long as we can average 1.5 points per game during homestands. What our boys showed during the Eastern Conference Tour is that we can beat the lesser opponents, play with most others, but right now we are struggling to beat the better teams. Still, if we can come away with 2 points in the next 2 games, I'll be smiling. Hiller put Kopi, Kuemper, and Byfield on the top line. For the past 2 seasons, I thought this would be one of the top lines in the NHL. The best all-around player, of course, Kopitar, QB a good passer, and Kempe a cold-blooded sniper. What could go wrong? This line has failed to gel in the last 2+ years. QB is not turning out to be as good as promised. He says, look, we all want him to succeed, but crap. Just look at the shots he takes and the results. All of his shots on goal look to me like he's warming up our goalie during pregame warmup. He doesn't have a killer instinct. He's not a physical player. Although he's 6'5", he's a better than average player, but that's it. Our GM got it wrong. Just look at the numbers. -4 on the ice, just 2 assists, and 0, yes, I said 0 goals in 5 games. I say let's trade him while he has some stock for a European sniper that can play with Kopi and Kempe. Let's debate this. And again, that was from Carlos in Mexico City. Well, I guess hot take from Carlos south of the border. First I will say, I said at the beginning of the season when we were talking about this 7-game road trip, I said if the Kings get 8 points on this trip, I would consider it a success. They've got 2 games left to get 2 points. Now, it doesn't mean I've been thrilled about everything I've seen from the Kings, but it's early. You got to be realistic about, a team that has a lot of different players in the lineup. There was a lot of turnover in the offseason, playing under a new system, trying some new things out. So I'll stand by my statement. 8 points on that road trip, and I'll be good with that. As far as Byfield, a slight correction. He has 3 assists in 5 games, not 2. He's a -3, not a -4. I think the Kings would be absolute idiots to trade Quinton Byfield. He's just coming off a career year. He's 22 years old. Now, again, like with Brant Clark, maybe your expectations are different than mine. And I get it. Number 2 overall pick. A lot of people feel like that guy's got to be an impact player. I think he will be in time. He's not necessarily that at the moment. But look, it wasn't that long ago. Plenty of Kings fans are saying Quinton Byfield's a bust. Total bust. He's never going to be an NHL player. Well, obviously, he's proven that he is that. And I think he has shown flashes of, dare I say, brilliance at times. Certainly, you have to be more consistent with that to be considered an elite player. And he's not that yet. And I know there's still the transition for him to be a number 1 center. And if you want to debate whether Quinton Byfield will be a great number 1 center in the NHL, I think that's a legitimate debate. He still has a lot to prove. But I just think I'm going to say this a lot probably in this episode, and it's not the most fun thing to hear, but it is early. I don't think we can pass judgment on Quinton Byfield through 5 games this season. I know you talked about him playing a couple of years with the top line. It was, last year. And I thought he did well last year. Set career highs in goals and points. So again, if you think Quinton Byfield as the number 2 overall pick has to be a superstar player, then he may never be that. I don't know. There's still a lot to prove as far as that goes. But is he a standout talent on the Kings at this point? I think he is. I'm not concerned that he hasn't scored a goal yet, personally. Did he have his issues playing center early on? Yes. Was that to be expected? It was by me. Like I said, I still wouldn't have moved him up to the wing, although that's debatable because I will even admit that if you listen to this show, I had even said, I'm not sure moving him to center to start this season is not something that's premature. So to me, if I'm the coach and I'm going to make that move, then I don't want to bail on it after 4 games. But at the same time, and we'll talk more about this as we go along, with Alex Turcotte emerging, being better than expected, you think, well, heck, he can play our 3rd-line center position, and I think we can get a lot out of him. Move Byfield up to the wing on the top line, and things kind of adjust throughout the lines. I actually kind of like that setup too. So, but overall, no, I don't think the Kings should trade Quinton Byfield. I think he's going to be just fine. Just give it a little more time. Andy in Guelph up in Canada checks in. We go from Mexico to Canada. And Andy says, had a good time at the Kings Leafs game in Toronto, despite the loss. Glad to see LA look solid on TV against the Habs. I met Mike Fuda at the Toronto game. Super nice guy. He took time to interact. I'm not a guy to press someone for a picture, but shaking his hand and having a brief interaction was enough. I've been a big supporter of Quinton Byfield playing center. However, to start the year, he frankly looked better on the wing. I really enjoyed the line combinations against Montreal. Turcotte, Leferrier, Fogle line was my favorite to watch. Overall, not a bad 5-game Eastern road trip. I'll take the 6 points. And again, that was from Andy in Guelph. Yeah, glad you had a good time at the game despite the result. I don't think I would have had as good a time as you did. But I am spoiled. I get to go to a lot of NHL games. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's not something you get to do a lot. Mike Fuda, former assistant GM of the Kings. He's been a guest on this show. I've interacted with him on social media, and every time I do, seems like a nice guy. So that's cool that you got to meet him. Again, Quentin Byfield, it's going to take some time. 4 games isn't enough to me, certainly to pass judgment on what he's going to be at center. Eventually, he'll be back there. I don't know if it's going to be at this point, sometime this season or not. But we'll just wait and see. I will repeat what I said on Thursday's show. Even though I'm not really in favor of bailing on him at center so quickly, I also can't deny I actually kind of like the lines that we had out there against Montreal. I like Fiala on the second line. I've said that a lot. I've always felt like he's a top 6 forward and should be on one of the top 2 lines. Turcotte centering the third line I like a lot. I think Tanner Jeannot's a 4th line guy. Kind of fits that role, and he was down there. So, like I said, maybe it was premature, but at the same time, I can't deny actually liking the line combinations we saw in the Montreal game. More fan feedback on the Kings' first 5 games of the season. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You think Anze Kopitar will have more or less than 66.5 points this season? Will Adrian Kempe have more or less than 31.5 goals? You can go to PrizePicks and download the app, make the right picks, and you could be a winner. And you can also win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on the action in most states, including California. Download the PrizePick app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Our next email comes from Robert in Hawthorne. He says, the coach has to do something with the structure of the penalty kill on this team. I was on an emotional roller coaster watching that Ottawa game, and though it's early in the season, they better fix this-ish. I hope the coaches, especially Hiller, get this right, because if not, it's going to be a long, long season. Keep up the good work. Appreciate what you do. And that is from Robert in Hawthorne. Well, the penalty kill did look a lot better against Montreal. I did really like how the PK looked in the preseason. It's been up and down so far during the regular season. Again, even though, and you said it yourself, Robert, and you probably get tired of me saying it, but again, it's early. Give it more time. I do like what I saw with the penalty kill being more aggressive. I like seeing the players, when they get possession of the puck, looking to actually attack the other team's net and not just dump it and go for a line change. So I do like the more aggressive nature of the PK. And look, as we saw in the playoffs, the penalty kill was an issue. It needed to change. Keeping it the same didn't make a lot of sense. So they're trying this out, going through some growing pains, hopefully by the end of the year, and also sooner rather than later, the penalty kill will be better. Our next email comes from Ed in Brea. He says, happy birthday, Ed. Talking to me. Yes, thank you very much. I had a nice birthday, except for the Kings losing to the Leafs on my birthday. He says, we are not a good team. Definitely defensive-wise. Offensive, same. However, they have their moments. Shockingly, I think our goalies have been the best with this defense, not currently good. I think Darcy Kemper was playing injured in Ottawa. He looked off, and injuries can explain why he didn't look sharp in that game. I do like David Riddick. However, he's not a starting level goalie. He's a backup, and I'm not confident he could play starter minutes. Copley the same, because he's just back to hockey. David Rittich did win in Montreal, so I'll give him credit for that. I do like Hiller bringing back the old lines. I always liked the line of Kopitar, Kempe, and Byfield. They clicked, and it worked. Same with Danault, Moore, and Fiala. Turcotte and Laferriere meshed, and now Turcotte is starting to bloom. As for the defense, we'll need to keep Spence in, and Gavi with Mikey works for now. Also, I question why Hiller benched Spence as well. Finally, 100% believe Jim Hiller should bring back the 1-3-1. Right now, Kings don't have a team identity. The 131 will help give them that identity. They need it again. Happy birthday again. Go Kings go. And that was Ed in Brea. Well, guess what I'm going to say? It's 5 games. I know, look, you can talk about line changes and switching things up on the fly or from game to game as far as the lines go. When we're talking about your strategy, your philosophy, your identity, you can't have a revolving door on those types of things. You have to establish those things, and it takes time. Even if the Kings were 0-5 on the season, I would have serious doubts about Jim Miller as a NHL head coach if he said, you know what, it's 5 games, it's not working, we're going back to the 1-3-1. No, you've got to give it more time. You can't expect this to just click overnight. And by the way, they're not 0-5. It hasn't been a complete disaster. Now, there have been some periods that have been complete disasters, but so far like I said, it's been a mixed bag, but I think that should be expected. So again, give it more time. He's not going to switch back to the 1-3-1 at this point. I doubt they'll do it at any point. But again, they're looking to establish an identity for this team going forward. We've seen what they have been the last 3 years. It's not enough to get them out of the first round of the playoffs. That's what they want to do. So they're changing things up, and they got to stick with it for more than 5 games. But thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate that. Our next email comes from Brian. He's in Los Alamitos. He says, this might be a dumb question, but with Quentin Byfield moving back to wing, I was wondering what makes the center position so much more challenging for young NHL hockey players as opposed to playing the wing. Is it the faceoffs, added defensive responsibility? Since you play hockey, I figure you must have some insight into the difference between center and wing. Lastly, I was sad to hear this will be Nick Nixon's final year calling Kings games. About a year ago, I heard him on your show saying he's got a couple more years left in him, but I thought he was more figurative than literal. Personally, I think the Kings can wear their crown call to end the 2012 Stanley Cup Championship final is one of the most memorable in NHL history. After Bob Miller left, I thought, well, at least we still have Nick Nixon. I didn't expect him to hang up the mic so soon. He'll be sorely missed. Thanks for another week of shows, and go Kings go. That is from Brian in Los Alamitos. As far as the difference between center and wing, obviously there's the faceoffs, but more it is, as you stated, the defensive responsibilities of a center, especially protecting kind of that high slot area in front of the net. And we did see a lot of goals being scored from that area so far this season. That's a high danger area. So yeah, and now Quentin Byfield wasn't on the ice for all those goals, but he was on the ice for some of them. He did have his struggles in some defensive coverage, and so they've decided, at least for the moment, to move him back to wing. We'll see how long that lasts. As for Nick Nixon, I agree with you when he said a couple of years. I didn't know he literally meant 2 years. A couple, 1, 2. And I think that call of him, the Kings can wear their crown. I've mentioned it. It's my ringtone. It's a great call. Simple, but perfect, right? And look, Nick's been doing this a long time, right? Nick's been doing this before I became a Kings fan. And I've mentioned at the top of the show, I've been a Kings fan for over 30 years. So he's put in his time. He certainly deserves a step away on his own terms. Not a lot of people get to do that in their careers, regardless of what it is. But it will be sad to see him go. But as I think I was talking to, who was it? I was talking to Russell Morgan the day that the news came down. He was a guest on the show. And I said, at least Nick got to be out of the shadow a little bit of Bob Miller, because he was always kind of in the shadow of Bob Miller, because Bob did the TV and Nick did the radio. And so it was cool to see Nick get his chance to be, and he did some TV back in the day, but mostly it was Bob, and that's what he was known for. But it was cool to see Nick Nixon get his time doing television and taking over for Alex Faust after that happened. So let's enjoy him this year while we still have him. All right, we've got one more email to read, and we're also going to preview the Kings' next game. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And, of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on Major League Baseball's postseason. The Dodgers are favored by a 1.5 in Game 6 of the NLCS against the Mets. The over-under is 8.5. How about the NFL? The Rams are 6.5-point favorites at home against the Raiders. The over-under is 43.5 points. And the Chargers are a 1.5 favorite at Arizona on Monday Night Football. The over-under 44.5. Join FanDuel, browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app, and get in on the action. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And we are so lucky to live in Southern California. So many live events we can go to. You got college football going on at the Coliseum and the Rose Bowl, NFL football at SoFi Stadium, but he's also got theater events, comedy shows, and concerts. But no matter what you enjoy, you need to use Gametime for all your ticket needs. And they have a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets to your favorite events even easier. It filters out the fluff, so you only see the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And you can get a seat for Game 6 of the NLCS between the Dodgers and Mets for less than $200 when you use your Gametime discount. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. Our final email comes from Bruce. He is in the OC, and he says, perhaps some Kings fans are forgetting how bad this team looked in the first 5 games last season, but I remember their loss to Colorado 5-2 and Carolina 6-5 in overtime pretty clearly. They played better the following 2 games with wins over Winnipeg 5-1 and Minnesota 7-3, but then lost to the Bruins 4-2. So last season, in the first 5 games, they had 5 points and were in 3rd place, I think. And this season, we have 6 points, and we're in 2nd place the last time I looked. As I mentioned in a previous email to you, I'm not going to form any critical, subjective opinions on this team until the 30 to 35 game point. However, I will stand by my contention that this team has a chance to make a run at a Stanley Cup this season. I may be off on a few of my predictions, but I still believe that Q is going to take another step forward towards being an elite talent in this league, and I don't care if it's a center or wing. If we look back at last season, the lineup against Montreal was the same top 6 forwards we had together last season, and I think this season our bottom 6 has improved. I think Kopitar is ageless. He and Kempe are on a point-per-game pace, and so far Clark's got 4 assists in 5 games. I think Fiala looks more comfortable with Danault and Moore, and I also think Lappy looks great with Turcotte and Fogle. Also, I don't think moving Q back to the wing was a statement on his play at center as much as it is how well Turcotte has been playing, and I'm really happy they're trying to get him more ice time. I was hoping that Hiller would fill the best combinations or find the best combinations during the preseason, but I'm glad he did not wait to change things up, and the result has been positive so far. I'm sure there'll be more changes needed to be made as the year continues, and I'd like to see Akil Thomas and Hellenius at some point this season get some time on the 4th line. But like you, I feel a lot better after the Montreal game. The system needs work, goaltending, defense, all needs work, but anyone who watched this team last season and understands the game of hockey should have confidence that this team has a chance to do very well this season. I think the last 2 games of this road trip and the first few games of the homestand will give us a better picture of this team, and I'm still very optimistic about the season. And that is from Bruce in the OC. I'm with you, Bruce. We got to give it more time. I don't know about 30 to 35 games. That might be a little bit more than I was looking. But yes, definitely need to give it more time before we make any real declarations about some of these players and the season for the LA Kings. I like your optimism. I hope you're right. Before we wrap up this show, I did want to give a brief preview of the Kings' next game. It'll be Sunday in Anaheim against the Ducks. Kings come into that game with a 2-1-2 record. As Bruce said, tied for 2nd in the Pacific Division with Vegas and Seattle. The Ducks are 1 point back. They have a 2-1-1 record. Earlier tonight, they lost in overtime to Colorado 4-3. I have not heard an update, by the way, on Kings goalie Darcy Kemper, so I do not know if he's going to start or not. I'm guessing it will be David Rittich getting the start against the Ducks, but that remains to be seen. And I think we'll see the same lineup we saw against Montreal for the Kings in the game against Anaheim. As for the Ducks, they shut off the Sharks in their season opener 2-0, lost to the Golden Knights 3-1, beat the Utah Hockey Club 5-4 in overtime before last night's overtime loss to Colorado. They've got a young goalie named Lucas Dostal who looks to be pretty talented, but he is young. He did have a shutout against San Jose and then a 45 save loss to Colorado. Troy Terry is the Ducks' leading goal scorer with 3 on the season so far. Face-off Sunday in Anaheim, set for 5 p.m. local time. Game will be broadcast locally on Bally Sports West, which I guess is being renamed FanDuel Sports. So sponsor of this show. Good for them. And if you live outside Southern California, I believe the game will be televised on the NHL Network if you have that. And as always, you can listen to the LA Kings on the 710 ESPN app. For you everydayers, those who listen to watch Locked On Kings every day, coming up on Monday's show, we will recap the Kings-Ducks game from Sunday. Monday, we'll preview the Kings game in Vegas that night. Wednesday, we'll recap the Golden Knights-Kings game. And then Thursday, I hope to have a special guest to talk about the Kings so far and preview their home opener against the San Jose Sharks. Of course, Friday, we'll recap that game as well as having another Kings fan feedback show. Busy week ahead. Hope you will be with us for all 5 days next week. And by the way, thank you to everyone who took the time to send an email for this week's show. This show is literally not possible without your participation. If you would like to get an email for next week's show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section. We appreciate that. It helps out the algorithm. Also love for you to stay interactive with the show and follow us on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday. And as always, go Kings, go.